Just forget about the openings and spend all that time on the endings. The best way to bring your chess to the next level is to master your endgame technique. In this video, I'm gonna share with you a powerful endgame strategy you must know. Nobody uses it at your level, so it's gonna be your unfair advantage. After thousands of hours of coaching chess players just like you, I know exactly why you lose in the endgames. What's up, chess player, and welcome to the Journey Guide Master, the place where you can improve every single aspect of your chess game. You have watched millions of opening traps videos and you're wondering why you're still not improving at chess, why you're still keep losing the games. Well, I'm gonna tell you that watching those opening traps videos is just a waste of your time. You are not becoming stronger as a chess player. That's why I have never done any opening traps videos in my entire life. Why? Because I truly want you to become better at chess. If you work on your endgame technique, you improve your chess understanding and you come to the next level in your chess. You really understand the game much better. You understand how the pieces work, and in so many different situations, every chess game is so different, but when you understand those patterns, you can make much better moves, high quality moves, which leads to better results. In comparison, if you learn those endless opening traps, you're not getting better as a chess player at all. Yes, maybe once in 100 times you're gonna catch your opponent into that opening trap and be incredibly happy about that. But next time your opponent is not gonna fall for it, you're not achieving anything at all. It's not like your level of game improves. It's just you are hoping for your opponent to blunder for that trick. I mean, it's not the way you should think about chess if you truly want to improve. So to bring your endgame technique to the level you always wanted it to be, let's take a look at this position. Seemingly completely normal, there is absolutely nothing special about it, but that's exactly a type of position that you get in your games, and then you need to win the game somehow. I'm playing here a tournament game, a classical tournament game against a very strong opponent like 2240 ELO rating, and I want to win as black because I want to fight for the first place in the tournament. How do I do that? How can that be possible from such a situation where my opponent plays here knight to c5, he is attacking my bishop, he's so active, he's controlling everything, he doesn't have any weaknesses on the entire board at all. How you come from this into a completely winning position where your opponent has to resign? That's exactly what I'm gonna show you today. Not only what strategy you need to use, but also how to implement it to really crush your opponent, leaving him no chances. First steps to outplay your opponent in the endgame is to understand which pieces you need to trade and which pieces you need to leave on the board. For example, this bishop, I definitely want to leave it for now, because if my opponent takes it, I'm gonna destroy my pawn structure. That would be double pawns in the center without any help from the side. That is the most horrible thing you can do. Double isolated pawns, it's so weak, you're gonna lose all of the pawns and be miserable. So of course, I don't want to do that, and also I just don't want to blindly exchange my bishop for a knight, for example here, bishop takes c5, because in that case, my opponent is gonna have two bishops advantage, which is usually great if you fight on the open board with pawns on both sides of the board. Like, the bishops are so powerful, they can attack both ways simultaneously. The knight is not capable of that. I'm playing the move bishop f5. Back in the old good days in the Soviet Union, the older generation, when they wanted to win against young talented guys, well, they said, if you want to win the game, you want to get to the endgame, because endgame is so much more difficult to understand. In the opening, you can just memorize everything. In the middle game, you can just calculate like crazy, especially if you're young, like I can go here, he goes there, then I go there, and I give a checkmate. Everything is perfect. But in the endgame, it doesn't work like that. You cannot calculate your way through. You have to understand what's going on here, which pieces are important, which are not, what is the long-term idea. It's what matters in the chess endgame, and let me show you how I managed to outplay my very strong opponent here. So I understood to place here the move c3, which is a very good move. It blocks my knight, it cannot go forward now. I understood that he controls the only open file in the game. His rooks are extremely active, whereas my rook on h8 is actually not doing anything at all, except for protecting this rook. What I want to do is exchange those rooks. First I take here on d2, he takes that, and now I'm placing my second rook on the d file because still this rook is doing absolutely nothing here, whereas this one is very active. What you want to do, you want to exchange your passive pieces against your opponent's active pieces. That's the goal. And then you need to make your pieces more active than your opponent's pieces. But that's not enough. That's only the first step of the system. So I'm playing rook d8 here. He's saying, well, if you want to exchange the rooks, it's your right, but I'm gonna play bishop c4, I'm gonna make my pieces even more active, and I'm gonna create a threat. The threat is attacking this pawn f7. The best strategy to win the chess game is to apply as much pressure on your opponent as possible, to create as many threats as possible, because if he's constantly under pressure, he is gonna eventually make mistakes. We are all human beings, we all make mistakes, and then your task is to use it and win the game. So that's what my opponent wanted to do. For example, if I make a reasonable move and play f6, everything is protected, but I weaken this key square on e6. My opponent will play knight to e6 with a check, I have to take it, and then he has achieved his goal. He has 2 bishops advantage, and in such a situation, without any weaknesses at all in his camp, I will never be able to win this game. So I don't want to do that. Instead, I decided that it's time for me to regroup my pieces and make a very powerful and right exchange that actually wins this game. What it is? First, I of course get rid of those rooks. Like I said, I don't really need it. King takes d2. And now once again, f6 is not great. Knight d6 is coming, winning the g7 pawn, or exchanging the knight for a bishop. So instead I'm playing knight to d8. Not the move that you would expect, because it's a move backwards. Normally I say never go back, but you know that chess is a game of exception. My knight on c6 is not doing great. Because of the c3 pawn, it cannot go forward, it's not doing anything useful. In fact, I'm making it better by going back to d8, but that is just the first step. Now, after the move b4, I reveal why I actually wanted to do it. Here, you see that white pieces are so much more active, no weaknesses. How on earth could I create even a single threat here and not even talking about winning the game? Well, here is what I did. I played bishop takes c5. I'm actually exchanging my bishop for a knight. But I'm not doing it just for that, because if I leave my opponent now one move to do whatever he wants, he's gonna go back, secure his 2 bishops advantage, and he's great. Exactly in this moment, I'm playing the move bishop to e6. I'm attacking that bishop. The bishop cannot move, because if it goes back, then I'm gonna win the pawn on a2, I'm gonna be a pawn up. If he protects, I can still exchange the bishops, and then I'm gonna get knight against the bishop, which is an imbalance. And imbalance is what you need if you want to outplay your slightly low-rated opponent or just any opponent in chess. Because if everything is equal, everything is symmetrical, you cannot win. You have a bishop, he has a bishop. You attack, he protects. No way you can outplay him unless he is very stupid. But if you create some imbalance, for example, if you're going to have a knight against the bishop, those are 2 completely different pieces that operate in a different way. So if you are smarter, if you are a stronger chess player, if you have a better technique, which this video will help you with, then you're going to be able to outplay your opponent. But that's the theory. Let's take a look at exactly how you do it to make it reality. My opponent plays king to d3. He's saying, okay, if you want to take, go on with it, but I'm going to take it back with the king, and my king will be so powerful in the center. And that's, by the way, a very important thing that I want you to remember. The king in the endgame is like the most important piece on the chess game. Why? Because it's becoming so powerful. It's like a whole rook, they say, in terms of its power. In the opening and in the middle game. You just want your king to be secure. You treat it like your child. You want it to be in the safety zone so you can go all in into the attack and try to destroy your opponent. But in the endgame, the situation turns completely and you want to use your king as a warrior. So many low-rated players are forgetting about that and therefore lose their games. Please don't be one of them. So I want to take that bishop, but I decided I'm in no hurry to do that. I can first improve my king, remembering the importance of the king here, and if you want to take, you can do that. You know what? I've created a powerful threat here, basically to win the game strategically in just one move, maybe 2. Can you spot that threat? Can you understand what to do if white, for example, plays h4, seems like not such a stupid move, just controlling more space here. But what kind of a threat I have created right now, I can execute right now as black. Feel free to pause the video to find it. It's so instructive. Alright, I hope you have taken your time, and I hope even more that you're gonna be able to find such opportunities in your own games. Because now black can take here on c4, king takes, and essential check the move b5. King has to go somewhere, let's say to d3, seems to be more reasonable to stay in the center. Then I play the move king to d5. And notice that this pawn can never move, because I'm gonna just take it with check. That means that on the king side, white cannot create any passers. Whereas on the king side, I have the pawn majority 4 against 3, and so I'm always going to be in the driver's seat, and eventually that would lead to my victory. I mean, there is no way white can survive here. Unfortunately, my opponent is not that stupid. He understands such a positional threat. I mean, he's 2240, that's a high level in chess, so he plays the move bishop b3. But I thought, okay, that is still good for me, because now I'm exchanging it. In the right moment, I'm changing the pawn structure. Why it's good for me to change the pawn structure? Because now that my opponent has double pawns, he cannot create a passer on the queen side. It's so essential in the endgame, try to create the passers. Because, well, that's what you want to do. That's what brings you the victory if you promote your pawn into the queen. The first step to achieve that is to create the passer, so the pawn that has nothing stopping it from its position and the promotion position. If you cannot do that, you can never promote a pawn. So I have a very good perspective to do that on the king side, whereas my opponent now has 0 chances to do that. That is why I felt, well, now I'm in the driver's seat. So my plan, long term, it's very important that in the endgame you think in terms of long-term plans. My long term is to create a passer over here, and then to deflect my opponent with it, break through on the queen side. In the best case scenario, I can just exchange, for example, this 2 against this 3, and then I'm gonna bring all of my pieces, and thanks to an extra pawn, win the game. Or, like it happened, you're not gonna believe it, but it actually happened, I created another passer on the queen side here, even though I have 2 against 3. Absolutely incredible. Stay tuned to see how it happened. I'm playing here 96. First of all, the key thing that you need to understand about the endgame, especially about the endgame when you are a little bit better. Like, objectively, this position is equal, totally equal, 0-0-0, you cannot do anything against the engine. But from a human perspective, and I would argue that's the only thing that matters, it's important whether you are in the driver's seat or your opponent. Who creates the threat, who applies the pressure, and who actually has a way to change anything in the position. I felt like in this position here, I'm definitely in the driver's seat, because I can create that passer, I can go forward, I can create threats. My opponent cannot do that. So that's why I like it, and that's why I go forward. I play f5 here. He plays the move c4, trying to limit my potential so that my king doesn't go forward. So that essential principle that I want you to remember, that almost nobody below 2000 elo use, so that's going to be a huge advantage for you, is do not hurry. Your position is better, your opponent has no way to somehow deal with it, then do not hurry, improve step by step, slowly, very slowly, until you're completely ready to break through. So the way I do it here, I step by step move my pawns. For example, here I can immediately play g5. But why on earth would I do that? My opponent cannot stop me. Maybe he's gonna create some weaknesses. Maybe it's going to be more difficult for him to deal with it. Maybe he's just gonna burn out the whole time while he's trying to understand my plan. So you don't want to be too fast, and you don't want to be too cheap. Maybe you even win a pawn sometimes, but that would lead to the fact that you're gonna lose all of your initiative, and then you cannot win the game. So here I'm playing the move g3, king to d6. I'm just remaneuvering my pieces back and forth here. I'm not in a hurry at all. Bishop goes to a7, exactly for the reason that my opponent has nothing to do. Knight to d8, bishop goes back. Of course, he's always happy to take a draw, but I never want to take a draw, because I have all the reasons in the world to stay in the game, to continue creating threats until my opponent collapses. If he doesn't, well, he has deserved a draw, no question about that. Knight f7. So I'm ready now to go forward with my pawns. After king to g3, I'm really playing that move g5, and I'm using the advantage of the fact that I have an extra pawn here. It's so essential. So many players forget about that, including my students. You have to play on the part of the board where you're stronger. So many people are just trying to go somewhere where they're weaker, their opponent has more pieces there, they're trying to create some threats, their breakthrough, and it never works. Why? Because they are not stronger here. But here I have more pawns, I'm ready to attack, and I have to use it to my advantage. My opponent plays bishop to d2, h6, goes back, and now I play the move h5. Also, what's important, we are approaching move 40, that means we are in the time trouble zone. On move 40 in a classical chess, you normally get additional 30 minutes on your clock. That helps a lot. So I want to create pressure while it's still not move 40, so it's more difficult for my opponent. He plays bishop to d2, and now comes the first critical moment. I play the move g4. Remember, my goal, the first step of my plan, is to create a passer here on the king side. If I remove that f-pawn, this e-pawn automatically becomes a passer. And that's exactly what happens, because my opponent has no way to avoid it. He plays the move f4, but now I have achieved my goal. I'm not in a hurry. I played king to d6 first, because if he takes, I play knight x, and then knight f3, and h2 is hanging, so he plays king e3. But now I make the move e4. I have achieved the first step of the system, because all of my pawns are on the light squares, and the bishop is on the dark squares. I want you to remember and to listen very carefully. If you are fighting against the bishop, you want to place all of your pawns on the opposite color of the bishop. Why? Because the bishop cannot attack it. As simple as that. On the light squares he has no way to attack, and his pawns are also on the dark squares, which means that nobody guards the light squares for him. That is the perfect scenario. This video is brought to you by Chestnut. Chestnut is making amazing chessboards that allow you to play online from a real 3D board. They have high quality chessboards, nice looking chess pieces, so that you can enjoy and having fun playing it. Chestnut boards also have so many training functions that I absolutely love to use to my training, and it helps me to improve my chess every day. This is, for example, Chestnut Evo. I love to use it for my trainings, but they have so much to offer you depending on your preferences and your budget. And the best part is you can just use the promo code Journey to Grandmaster or click the link in the description to get a big discount on all of the Chestnut products. If you are playing with the bishop though, then you want your pawns to be on the opposite color from your bishop, so that the pawns are controlling light squares and bishop is controlling dark squares. Everything is under control. This way, light squares are not under control at all. But, very, very important, I'm still not winning the game. This pawn, yes, it's a protected passer, but it's blocked. He only has one weakness to deal with. I mean, it's my strength and his weakness that I have this protected passer. So to really win this game, I actually need to take advantage of one of the most important principles in chess. It's called principle of two weaknesses. Yes, you have one strong thing, but it's not enough. Your opponent is defending it or blocking it, and you cannot do anything. You need to create a second strength or a second weakness in your opponent's camp to actually break through. In my case, I need to use this queen side. I need to create a second passer, or I need to exchange this 2 against 3 so that I can go through and I can break through on the queen side, creating that second weakness for my opponent. It's such a powerful strategy that you absolutely must use in your own games. So that is exactly how I used it here. Bishop to c3. I play knight to d8. I'm remaneuvering here once again. Do not hurry. That is the key principle, especially since it's move 40. So we both got some time. I was trying to figure out a plan. I understand that objectively it's still a draw. That is no mystery for me. My problem is, or my challenge is to create a difficulty for my opponent. That is how you win in chess. You make your opponent's life as miserable as possible. So I first played king to c6, but then I realized that it's not the right way. My knight has to be on c6. It controls so many important squares there. So then I repeat the position and go to e6. He goes back because he cannot do anything. And now I'm playing knight to c6. That is the perfect square for my knight, because I'm ready for breakthrough on the queen side. So he plays bishop to d2. I go king to d6, cannot do anything, so he just repeats the move, bishop e1, goes back and forth, and now the moment comes. I'm ready for breakthrough. I'm playing b6. So how do you understand the ideal moment to break through? You remember, do not hurry, but also you need to realize this key moment where you actually need to break through. Otherwise, you're gonna miss it and you're gonna never win the game. Therefore, it's essential to understand. How do you do that? Well, you need to optimize all of your pieces. This way, when I played king to g6 and knight to c6 and b6, I realized, okay, that is actually the best possible position for all of my pieces to break through on the queen side. Because if some of the pawns are getting exchanged, well, my king would have an opportunity to go forward. He is in a perfect position. My knight is protecting here. I'm playing after bishop d2 a5, and my knight is protecting this pawn. That is essential. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to make that possible. And I'm also attacking the b4 square with my knight. And I'm also controlling this d4 square, so my opponent's king cannot go there. So the knight is as perfect as possible. If my opponent takes, then I thought both knight takes a5, attacking those pawns, and pawn takes, with an idea to go king to c5, are interesting. Instead, my opponent plays the move b5. He wants to just remain as solid as possible. And then after the move king to d8 here, comes up with a really good idea. I mean, he's really a strong player. He plays bishop c1. He realizes that he needs to activate his bishop. On a3, the bishop is the most beautiful piece. In fact, I mean, the best move for me would be here to play king to c5. Like, I want to play king b4, and next move I'm just winning the game because I'm taking all of those pawns, the game is over. But unfortunately, it's over not with the result I hoped for. Here, bishop to a3 comes with the checkmate. So please remember, it's never too late to spoil a game. Always and always, you have to remember the key principle that most of the chess players completely ignore. You never play alone. Most of the chess players are so focused inside of their ideas, their plans, their strategies, that they completely forget that on the opposite side of the board, there is a real human being with his or her ideas, dreams, and hopes, and he really also wants to win the game. So you should be very, very careful with that. Before you make your move, try to understand what is your opponent's idea. Never make your move without thinking what your opponent can do in response. So I'm not doing that. I'm, thank God, not that stupid. Instead, what I did is I played the move knight to e6 here. I'm improving my position. Later on, bishop to b2. I still cannot play king to c5 for the same reason. So instead, I'm playing king to c7. That prepares the move knight c5. Knight c5 now is a huge, huge threat. But there was also a strategical threat. My opponent plays bishop a3. He stops knight c5. It's now not dangerous. He's going to just exchange. I'm playing here king to d7. Quiet move, which actually makes kind of a zugzwang for my opponent. He has 0 moves that he can make without changing anything significant in the position. The king cannot move. He can only go back, but then my knight comes to d4 with a devastating effect. It can go to f3, it attacks the b3 pawn. You cannot allow that. The bishop cannot go back because then the knight comes to c5, attacking the b3 pawn, and you cannot protect it. And the bishop cannot go forward because all of the squares are under control. So the only move my opponent has is b4, which he did. But now he still has no reasonable moves to go. So I just play king to c7, and I'm like, okay, guy, make a move. What are you gonna make? Because the bishop still cannot move, the king still cannot move, so you have to make a pawn move. But you don't really want to do that because it's so weak, all of it here. If you play c5, I'm going to take on b4, and I'm going to win the pawn eventually here and then the game. So my opponent takes here, I take back. And here, to tell you the truth, to be completely honest with you, if my opponent makes the right move, it's still a draw here. He just has to play bishop e7. He has to be patient like a rock and just move the bishop all the way here and back and hope that I don't have any active ideas I cannot break through. From a human perspective, it's incredibly difficult. It's much more human to play the move c5 that he did, because it seems like, well, the pawns are not allowing the king to move forward, the knight also cannot really move forward, everything is fine. But this move, unfortunately for my opponent, completely loses the game. Why? Because after king to b7, that's another zugzwang. My opponent has 0 moves to make. The king cannot move, the bishop cannot move because the pawn is going to be lost, and if he moves one of the pawns, then I'm gonna go forward with the king and win both of them. So he plays the move king to f2. Now my knight jumps and this pawn on b5 is hanging. He played c6, which is a very smart trick, and I'm sure so many players, maybe including you, would fall for this trick. You really want as black to play king to b6 and just win all of those pawns, but king to b6 actually loses the game on the spot. That is why I always say it's never too late to spoil your game. And always look for checks, captures, and threats if you're thinking about your opportunities as well as if you're thinking about your opponent. Because here the only check is bishop c5, but it's completely winning the game. If you take the bishop or the pawn, then c7 comes, promoting the pawn, and you're busted, you have to resign. And that would be such a pity, like you built this whole strategy, you're so smart, but then one little mistake and you're gone. That is how difficult chess game is. So I really want you to make sure you never make a move without thinking what your opponent can do. Thank God I have thought about that, so I'm playing the move king to c7, and my opponent still has the same problem. The pawn is hanging, he cannot do anything. He played b6 check with the same hope that I'm gonna take it, and then he still has this bishop c5 trick, but instead I'm taking the c6 pawn, no checks available. I'm gonna take the second pawn next move, and there is nothing he can do. He played bishop b2, just knight b5, the perfect position for the knight, because I control this key d4 square, so the king cannot come here and eat all of my pawns. I control these squares away from the bishop. My a pawn is ready to go, and I'm gonna just win that pawn on b6, which is exactly what happened. Now I have 2 pawns up, so my opponent resigned, my king will go forward, remember the importance of the king, and then I'm gonna promote this pawn, and then eventually the e pawn, and I win. Now, if you want to finish your game before the endgame even starts, in this video I've prepared for you 3 powerful attacking rules so that you can checkmate your opponent as early as possible.